which is Jens. And somebody else who's on the screen actually. Does anybody know who this is? The guy on the picture. His name is Sven. But what does Sven do? Bouncer? Did I hear bouncer? Who said bouncer? Yeah, very kind. Because when I was 25, and that's more than 10 years ago, I went to Berlin and the first person that I faced in the night was him. Because I was with 8 friends and I stood in line for the Berghain. And 5 people in front of us, they got turned away. And I could see the face of this guy. And so he's going to decide if we're going to get in. Wow. And he pointed at me, he said, how many? 8? Come here, he said. And we went in, and it was a super raving, hot, sweaty gay night in Berghain. And they wanted some fresh Amsterdam meat, I think. So we had a really great time. So is it difficult to get into Berghain? Yes. Is it difficult to get into esports? Maybe. But that's the comparison that we'll be making in this talk, but only in the beginning. I think Jens and I, if you put together the amount of calls, meetings that we have had in the past 5 years alone, to talk with people that want to get into esports, I think it's 1,000 or more. It's probably 1 a day on average. And these are the people that line up. I think, Jens, you've seen all these people line up for esports. Talking to investors, startups. There's a lot of startups here today. Brands want to get in. Media, the traditional media people, they're here as well. Services, like in Nielsa, I want into esports. Wink. And financial services. And a lot of people that contact me through LinkedIn. Peter, I want to be in your space. How can I get in? And of course, there's governments that Jens and I sometimes have to explain what the hell is going on.
I try to avoid these meetings.
You try to avoid it. Are you successful in doing it?
It's the most frustrating ones.
No?
All the people talking with governments and institutions there is the most frustrating of all experiences.
Yeah. With most people you have to take one step back to explain them, but with government you have to go in another room and start explaining it. And we don't have the energy for that. We're too old for that. But getting into esports, I think one thing, well, I think Jens and I agree on a lot of things. I hope we also disagree on things, is that we have to explain to people this esports thing. It's been around for a long time, and this is not this hockey stick expectation, new industry or anything, but a very healthy, linear, growing business. Or how would you phrase that, Jens?
Yeah, I think it's one thing where I love to promote esports. I love to grow esports and kind of contribute to the growth of esports. But I think what's tremendously important for the industry to grow is to manage expectations, right, of all these kind of stakeholders that you've kind of basically been kind of showing on the slide before. So if we want to kind of give people an interest in esports, we sort of raise their expectations. It's important to raise expectations of what's in front of us. I think one thing that's not necessarily been too healthy in the past is that expectations of kind of what is the growth in esports, how will it unfold over the next years, over the next decades, has probably been kind of managed in a bit of an odd way, meaning kind of people are basically claiming, hey, esports is exploding, right? Which sort of sets the stage for, in 5 years, we're going to be 2 times bigger than soccer. No, we're not, right? So the numbers that you have been putting together, the numbers that you show as part of your report, basically showing what I've been observing for the last 23 years in my career, is that we see linear growth year over year in esports. It's mostly driven by digital natives growing up with video games, growing up with a paradigm in esports, and kind of being native to digital devices, drawing the target audience at large. And this is what I think is so important to explain to all these new stakeholders in order to kind of set us up right for what's coming next.
Yeah, also to avoid a bubble or a crash or something. That's the last thing that we need. So we have to manage expectations, that's one thing. And the other thing is start to explain that esports is not this standalone thing, and the underlying growth, there you can see some exponential growth. And Jens, we put together this slide based on a flip over that you made. Can you talk us through the thinking here?
Sure. So kind of looking at the last 2 decades in esports and in competitive multiplayer gaming, the one thing that I thought I saw over these 2 decades is sort of games that basically elevated esports each time that they've been coming to the market and sort of redefined or defined a certain genre. So one of these kind of iconic games is Counter-Strike, which is kind of, I'd say, still at its peak today. Counter-Strike has basically managed to kind of aggregate about 3 million kind of monthly active gamers, and we've seen it really raising the bar for what is the size, what is the audience, what's the exposure that esports can achieve. A game that came after here would be World of Warcraft, which few people actually really realize World of Warcraft was one of the biggest esports games that we had in history. It's been kind of pushed into more of a player furthest environment rather than kind of a PvP, kind of player furthest player competitive mode. But in 2008, I remember well when ESL was running a big competition, I think at one of the first Gamescoms in Cologne, it was the largest esports broadcast that we had done. So World of Warcraft basically redefined MMORPGs. It became the largest MMORPG, and it still is probably way up there on the top list of best and most played MMORPGs. And that game acquired more than 10 million monthly active users. So it raised the bar. The next iconic game that we saw in the market, League of Legends, defined the MOBA genre really because it became the largest MOBA in the space. And again, it raised the bar at how many players will play such game at the same time. And for League of Legends, it's probably about 30-40 million users in the Western markets, about 60-70 million users in China and in Asia. So that game again raised the bar of how many players can a game feature that's an esports game. And what's coming after is on everybody's minds right now with Battle Royale, which is sort of dominated by Fortnite at the moment. PlayerUnknown's Battleground kind of pushed it forward kind of a year ago. And that game again raised the bar to now kind of more than 80 million monthly active users in Western markets. So kind of each of these games defined a new genre, they defined a new way of kind of play style, and have been elevating the target audience that enters esports, that plays esports games, becomes esports fans every single time. So what would that mean if we continue on that graph? It means like 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're likely going to see that sort of the entire mind space of people, which is right now in Battle Royale games, for a lot of the audience, is radiating to a new genre. A new games company will have an opportunity to install a new genre that we don't know today. Maybe it's a shooter again, maybe it's a strategy game again. And it will probably be at that point in time 120, 130, 140 million monthly active users that game will be able to acquire. So every single time that something like that has happened in history was the most important and the most exciting times for me, because these new genre-defining games truly elevated competitive multiplayer gaming and esports for that sake. So what we're in right now in the last 1 or 2 years with Battle Royale is a very, very exciting time for all of us.
Yeah, it gives hope to people that thought that every genre had been created, every game had been thought up. But what has happened during the line is also that it's moved from new game experiences and genres to new entertainment experience, because Fortnite, of course, is a lot more than just a game. And if you add up all the extra time that's being spent on games now versus the past 11 years ago, the games market was worth around 35 billion. Now it's 135, 148. So we added $100 billion in value in only 11 years. But more important is what happened in time. During that period, 6 times more time is spent on gaming in the world. 6 times more than only 10 years ago. I am including viewing, because that is part of the DNA of any game nowadays, I guess. So that's exponential growth. And that points us to what makes us very special in games. We put time first before money. We are so focused on engaging, entertaining, making people happy, attracting people, giving people tools to have fun for free, and then we deserve to earn good money. And that is different from how other medias approach it and gate their content. So that's the secret sauce of our business. And that even a Reuters says that we, or games as a whole, is more popular and more profitable than any other form of entertainment, including TV as a whole. The magic is in the detail, and that's with the little people underneath. We are extreme artists in entertaining people that don't want or to spend money, don't have money, but have a lot of time, and people that have a shitload of money and they want to all spend it in my game. And one single environment has to serve both. And think about it, that's very, very hard, and that's something unique that we as an industry can do. And I believe that because of that the whole world is playing games, it has an impact on the whole world and therefore every market. So what the kids or the youth or even Jens and I are used to now because we love gaming in terms of engagement is something that will have impact on any other market. I could not watch Ajax Juventus in my hotel room yesterday because it's gated content. I couldn't get the VPN to work. Shit. That is unacceptable for the next generation, that you cannot access the content that you want to see. Even if you want to pay, I couldn't get them. Just as an example, that was my frustration of last night. 1-1, not bad. And Jens, things have changed in how developers approach making games.
Yeah, I would think so. On the other hand side, I think that's still the biggest sort of gap in the industry somehow. I think in esports, if you want to kind of look at the core esports experience, I'd say kind of having a game that's equally great to spectate and to watch as it is to play the game would ultimately make for the best esports game, right? So what that means is if you start designing a game, if you start building a game, you probably want to put equal effort into kind of thinking about, hey, my game gets played on a big stage in front of 15,000 people, and these 15,000 people, they might be players or not, they should be entertained by that experience. So you should kind of spend time with your design team and with your vision for the game around, like, that's something that the game needs to check a box on. But you should also kind of think about the game just being a great game experience for a person sitting down, kind of having a game session. And kind of the balance between both is something where I still think that most games that we see in the market today have not been sort of having that kind of ingoing kind of statement or mission statement reflected in the fundamental game design. I do think that that's something that is just really getting incorporated on the game developer side, where they have learned from what esports is, and they're understanding, hey, it might be helpful if I pay more attention to the spectation side to begin with, and not make it an afterthought. And I think all the games that or most of the games that we saw before never have really done that, and I think there's going to be a generation of games going forward that have actually started their design process by reflecting these assumptions here in the right way. And that will again lead to a greater entertainment offering that will elevate esports. And you know that the development cycles for a great AAA game in esports is like 3, 4, 5 years. So what we see starting on that paradigm, like today or maybe 1 or 2 years ago, will hit the market in like 2, 3, 4 years from now. So I think there will be a next level of esports games hitting the market in the not too distant future. Again, going back to the slide that I showed before, what's elevating it next. And I'm extremely excited about that, because it might be games that are fully tailored to a spectation experience and equally fun to play.
Yeah, and it doesn't account only for the top games. You see this in indie games and everything, creating their own niche community that also wants to watch or experience it. And I like it. Farming simulators here as well. And people say, why, how can that be in esports? But to make that into something where the community can enjoy watching it is, of course, an essential part of entertainment. So I embrace that. And please realize that watching video game content has always been very popular. And that if you add in the West, if you add Mixer and YouTube up and Twitch and everything, more hours are spent watching that content than the whole of Netflix, which is 50 billion hours. And we talk a lot about streaming and live, but there are opportunities for formats for video on demand, because, for instance, on YouTube, the video on demand hours around Fortnite created almost twice as many hours of watching than on Twitch, than on live streaming. So let's not get caught up in esports only in live streaming. It's about the video content as a whole, and people that realize that can see it as an opportunity for their startup, for their business, or whatever. And good news, the lapsed gamers are back. Because, speaking for myself, I don't have time, I don't have the focus to learn all these games, but I love to watch esports, I love to watch over the shoulders of my kids. But I'm back, I can feel the passion again. I thought I was going to lose my passion. I had to find a new passion. But luckily, with all this esports, I'm still in the game, but without playing a lot. So, when my colleagues set out to make this new consumer segmentation that fits this new world, where we value viewing on an equal level as gaming, on an equal level as spending money on devices, gadgets, hardware, I'm one of the personas, the backseat viewer. I like that. Jens, are you also a lapsed gamer, or where are you?
Yeah, this could be me. So I
looks like you.
and like I find it interesting how kind of I have this big challenge that I'm sort of 43 years old right now, and I feel like, can you really still truly relate to what's happening there with Generation Z right now, which is the generation that's growing into esports? And I'd say the answer, unfortunately, is my kind of the ability to intrinsically understand how they think and what they do is kind of decreasing. But excitingly though, I can see that I am transforming into a new part of the esports ecosystem myself by having a decreasing amount of time to spend with actually playing games, particularly PC-based games. It's just very hard now as a family father and kind of somebody who kind of got a job that kind of fills his day quite well, to kind of still kind of go and sit down and play a 3 hours League of Legends session, just like we do in the good old days. But I love watching the game. Right? So I am an esports persona. I am less of the playing one, I'm more of the watching one, and I also observe myself spending way more time with touch-based and mobile-based esports experiences. Like I would not play kind of games on my touch device that wouldn't be competitive multiplayer, so games such as Brawl Stars, such as Clash Royale have been games that are just made for me. They're more short-form, competitive multiplayer experiences. They kind of fill the small niches. They're kind of right for my time spent, and I'm the guy who will definitely watch on the weekend the League of Legends finals in Rotterdam from the LEC. I'm the guy that sort of will spend a lot of time in kind of fandom behind the teams, but I'm not the guy that will still play League of Legends or Counter-Strike or kind of any of these games on a day-by-day basis, if on a monthly basis even. And that's an interesting opportunity for startups. That's an interesting opportunity to look at for kind of lead providers and content providers, and how do I address these different kind of sub-audiences in the right way?
Yeah, it's also an opportunity for people that sell for merchandise, for instance, you know? You can sell crazy shirts to me. I might never wear them, but I'd like to buy stuff. I use my son as an excuse to buy the biggest PC gaming rig that you can buy. And gives me a kick. I don't really can't use it. So there's new target groups, and for peripherals. By the way, did you know that Fortnite and the Battle Royale genre added $1 billion in revenues for the headset manufacturers last year? $1 billion. It jumped from 2.8 to 3.8. So just think about it. And there were a lot of, yeah, that's just a lot of money. That's what I. So this is one of the big questions that Jens and I have been posed over the past year. So this sounds sort of like sports with all the viewing and stuff, and I think our answer is always yes or no, and we tend to lean to the no. And I'll put this picture on, but do you get this question a lot, Jens, about is your sports?
I don't think I have less people who start to argue about it, right? Like 10 years ago, people would say like, well, it's not sports and whatnot. Like I always said, like, honestly, I don't really care if sort of we call ourselves sport. It's kind of has a certain characteristics of sort of what the sports entertainment industry particularly looked like. And that's great, and we can kind of learn a couple of things on how traditional sports entertainment entertain their sort of audiences. But truly, what you're saying here is sort of this digital-first paradigm, the set of that it's based in kind of entertaining our audiences digitally first, is something that actually the sports industry, the sports entertainment industry at large, is learning from. And I also say that sort of we're kind of with what we do in esports, if you look at kind of platforms such as Twitch, it is really pushing the boundaries on what sort of even kind of digital entertainment at large is looking like. So esports for me is sort of a bit of a lighthouse, kind of that redefines entertainment at large and pushes the boundary of what will that look like in the future.
Yeah, and when this esports hype or the esports starts to become so popular, the games companies thought, we need to get people from the TV business, sports business in, because we're going to be rich with media rights, because these are all billion-dollar deals. Well, we have to warn people that think in that way, because the sports business knows that that business model is under pressure and possibly will die out. When I spoke to the Premier League, He said, Peter, I'm a bit worried. I, as a league, have no direct relationship with the consumers that like my brand and the clubs. I said, whoa, that's weird. That's so different than in gaming. We are about a direct consumer relationship and do all kinds of analytics and optimize our services. How can you optimize your service? Yeah, we do research. I said, oh, wait a minute, that whole world is so indirectly related to the consumer because of the business model of media rights and sponsorships, that they know that is not a sustainable way of doing business. So that's why the whole sports world is looking at gaming to learn more from us, how we monetize our games and how we are innovating monetizing video streams, like Twitch example here. So watch out when you think that you should embrace the traditional business models, because the traditional world is coming our way. And that's another opportunity. If you're in gaming and smart about the mechanics, take it to sports, take it to media, get a startup, be rich, be happy. Another opportunity. And these are just some random words spread out that will provide even more opportunities in the future. Jens, you want to pick out one and explain why it's on this list?
Oh, I mean, I could talk for hours about each of them. To pick one means like I should pick a good one, like which one is exciting. I think true cross-platform is something that's of real excitement. I think there's been for a long time sort of a large discussion around kind of mobile platforms, kind of how do they get into kind of esports and competitive multiplayer gaming. And I think that we have kind of seen a new generation of games that have done the best job of doing that, and that's these kind of true cross-platform games, such as Fortnite, such as to some extent PlayerUnknown's Battleground, which have sort of taken the existing game on mobile, on the PC, on the console, and kind of ported it to mobile as well. And the community, particularly in Fortnite, kind of converges to one community. It is not split communities, like not one on the console, not one on the PC, and they somehow don't like each other, or kind of dislike each other, or kind of are not in sync with each other, but they're truly one community that accepts, hey, we're playing on different devices, and there's certain different characteristics if I play on a different device or on a different platform, but we're one community. And Ninja is one of our biggest idols. It doesn't matter if I play on the mobile phone, it doesn't matter if I play on the console or on the PC. And I think that is a wonderful community for esports growth at large, that we're not talking about split communities across platforms, we're talking about true cross-platform release on a global basis with one community kind of rallying and firing behind one game. It's a great opportunity for larger esports events. It's a great opportunity for larger esports broadcast and content, because it caters to all platforms at the same time.
Yeah, put on top of that viewer participation on any screen, any place in the world, and many opportunities. A lot is going to change. We're going to grab more time, I'm afraid, with our market, because it's so innovative. And these are just tools and directions that people are thinking about. But ultimately, of course, the fans are everything, and everything that you think up. And game publishers know that. My fans are everything. It's my community is everything, like Jens said. And esports is just on the top of this pyramid that is a foundation of the success of my esports. I cannot launch an esports without having a gaming community, without having streamers thinking it's fun to talk over my game. And what can happen if you don't have that foundation, the risk is if you go too much for esports, this might happen. Yeah? You go for the full blast esports in a sports style, but your community has not settled yet. Your community is not strong enough yet to carry that. And that's a risky situation, as you can imagine, walking underneath this little rock. And how do we, and how do Jens and I try to see signs of change or games taking a risk? We're both very much involved in the analytics space with Mojo Madness and myself from a market analytics perspective. So we try to see signs of change. Can you actually briefly explain the analytics that Mojo Madness does? Because you guys have like in-game analytics that are used by the professional sports teams, I guess.
Sure, I would love that. I just don't want to break my principle of not promoting my company on stage.
That's Mojo Madness. Okay, but we dive into data to also form an opinion. We don't just shout out things at events. And this looks almost like what you would see in the stars. So what this is on the brown or orange left-hand lower corner is October 2017, and this is every month where the game is in terms of share of core PC players playing the game, and the left one, or the vertical one, is average time they spent per day on that game. And that's a nice matrix to see how a game is doing. So this is for Fortnite, and it always takes quite some time for a game to find their sweet spot. So a game is tested, people play, try other stuff, and then, in this case, after about 10 months, it settles around a certain share of players, a community, and a certain amount of time that they spend per day. It has found its sweet spot. But, if you track that, if it goes out of that circle, something has happened. And what happened here, it moved slightly to the left because people in February were trying Apex. Because Apex came in at #1. This is PC only, by the way, but it came at #1 not only in viewing, but on PC as well. And if you look at this per game, you can see it. This is like Overwatch, PC only. But remember, yes, Overwatch is also console, but esports is PC. So you want a foundation in the PC world to fuel your esports, not only console. And it settled nicely there after quite a decline over the past, in the first year. But now you can see it has gone further to the left. And Overwatch is one of the two most impacted games by the arrival of Apex. It is not Fortnite that has been hurt by Apex coming in, it's Overwatch and Call of Duty, isn't it? Jens,
yes, right.
Why is that?
So when I like one of these kind of questions that I got asked oftentimes is like, isn't kind of Apex Legends a new battle royale game that we saw coming in? Isn't that entirely cannibalizing Fortnite, right? And going to your charts here, even though both games are kind of in the same fundamental kind of genre, battle royale, they do deliver a quite different game experience. I tend to try to explain it with Richard Bartle's kind of game characteristics diagram. Richard Bartles was a famous game designer that kind of put 4 different fundamental character traits to the gaming audience. Number 1 is the socializer, number 2 is the explorer, number 3 is the achiever, and number 4 is the killer. So you basically can look at games, you can say like these games cater to one of these kind of certain characteristics for and kind of that players would sort of be tailoring to. Fortnite is a game that kind of surprisingly kind of radiates and kind of feels kind of moved into the sector of kind of explorer and socializer. It's a game that's competitive by nature, but people really love to play Fortnite a lot for the aspect of exploration in the game, of sort of hanging out with their friends, while a game like Apex, Overwatch, or Call of Duty are games that very much appeal to kind of achievers, or the killer profile of players, highly ultra competitive, very, very core esports. So now, the answer is Fortnite didn't suffer from any game such as PUBG, or didn't really cannibalize that to begin with. It didn't really suffer a lot or kind of cannibalize a lot with Apex Legends. But Apex Legends, Call of Duty, and Overwatch are all sort of in one kind of block of the same target audience. And that's kind of, for a game developer who's kind of pushing out a new game, he needs to be mindful of kind of how many titles in that certain kind of category of gamers are out there, because it's very, very hard to establish esports on top of kind of a group of 2, 3, 4 titles kind of that are competing for the same kind of mindshare, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for Overwatch, you can see that they have the biggest, most expensive, most invested league out there in esports. Are they the Rock with a small base? I'm not saying so, but yeah, you have to watch out if your core community starts moving to the left, to the left, to the left, and your share in popularity drops to 5% of core gamers. So when you step into esports, you have to understand this all. League of Legends, the legacy of esports has its sweet spot for a long time, around 24% of core gamers, and it just stays there. And when an Apex comes in, nothing really happens because the foundation is so firm. The communities are real fans. And sometimes, when you've settled down like Dota, smaller, but in some countries bigger than League of Legends. You've got your community, and then suddenly we see them break out. Suddenly they have like 3 times the amount of players. Does anyone know what happened in the past couple months that made Dota suddenly surge? Auto chess. Yeah, Jan, very good. Jan works at Tencent, he knows. It's auto chess. If you look at auto chess, the name, you know it's made by Chinese, because I think Westerns would never call sort of a game around Dota figures in a chess format auto chess, but you do remember it, it works very well. And this is a game that appeals to a new and way broader audience, and for a lot of people, they for the first time see the Dota characters, the Dota story, and they're drawn to the original Dota game, which is harder to master, but there's people going in. And this you can't predict. So some opportunities you just can't think of beforehand, but there's many out there, as you can see. And yes, just to conclude, I think getting into esports isn't as hard or as easy as getting into Bergheim. I'm not sure, but it's at least as exciting as it is, and sometimes frightening as this guy is. Jens and I would like to thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.